In this video, I'm going to show you how to install a split jamb pre-hung interior door for beginners. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel's all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. Before installing the pre-hung door, I do recommend that you take the door off of the frame, also known as jamb, then spray them outside first with paint, or just paint them with a brush or roller before installing them. If you've never done any door installation before, I just want to give you a quick overview of the tools you might need. I like to use a finish nailer. This is a battery powered one. It's going to make the job go way quicker, but if you don't have one of these, a lot of people won't. Just use a hammer and finish nails, and then you need a punch to set the nail. And then on to what's called a wonder bar. This is going to be used to adjust the door. This is going to make it easy. We got shims. We're going to shim around the hinges. We got screws. You want to make sure that you get hinge screws that match your hinges. So if you have black hinges, get black screws. If you have silver hinges like we do here, you want to get silver screws. I got an impact driver here for driving the screws, but you could also use a drill if that's all you have, and a 4-foot level. So that's going to be the basics for the tools that you'll need for installing the door. Now that we got the door slab and door frame painted, we're going to place the door slab back onto the frame, because that's how we're going to install it, because we need to have that slab on there to let us know the adjustments we need to make. When installing the slab back onto the frame, a little tip that will be helpful: get something that's about 1 inch thick and place underneath of the slab, and that's going to elevate it enough to be in line with our hinges, because if not, you're going to be fighting it. So just a little tip. I'd like to go over a couple things about these doors before we get started. First thing, what is a split jamb? A split jamb is simply where the jamb is literally split, and this can be pulled apart, as you can see here, because these come with the trim on them. They have to pull apart in order to install them. So the biggest benefit to a split jamb door is that the trim is already installed on them, so it makes the installation way quicker overall. The next thing, what is a pre-hung door? Well, a pre-hung door is where the frame or the jamb is already installed with the slab, so it's all one unit. Again, it speeds up the process of the installation significantly. And it's an interior door, meaning it's meant to be installed indoors, because this cannot be installed as an exterior door. Weather will destroy this door in a heartbeat. This is almost like a thick, dense particle board. And there are solid core doors where this is full and it's solid and it's more soundproof. And typically that is what I would install, is a solid core door, but this is a hollow core door. And another thing is the handing. I want to go over how you determine the handing. If we turn this door around like so, another great thing, they're really light when they're hollow core. So when it comes to the handing, all you have to do is stand from the side that has the most exposed jamb. You'll notice the other side, the door was flush. That is what I would consider the back side of the door. So if you go to the front side of the door where most of the jamb's exposed, if you look at where the handle is, the hinges are going to be on the left. So we're going to call this a left-handed door. If the doorknob was positioned here and the hinges were on this side, then we'd call that a right-handed door. So that's just a couple things, and this is a masonite door that came from Lowe. So if you'd like to purchase these, I'll put a link to them in the description below so you can pick them up for yourself. To begin the installation, we got to pull the jamb apart, and whenever you unpackage the door, definitely remove the staples that are holding the jamb together, because if you don't, you try to pull this apart, it's going to break the jamb. Very important. So we already removed all the staples and packaging. Now we're just going to pull this off. You can see it pulls off really easy. Because we want this to be an in-swing door, this section is going to be installed from the inside of the room. So we're going to carry this into the room. When I install these doors alone, I have my finish nailer with me and I clip it onto my side. So whenever I set the door up into place, I just tack the top corner, and that's going to hold the door until I shim it and place a screw in. So I'm going to set this into place now. All right, that's enough to hold it into place temporarily. We're now going to check the door. Now it comes down to critiquing the reveals and getting this thing to open and shut correctly. Every door is going to be different. The opening has a lot to do with how plumb or level the door has to set. Sometimes you don't set the door exactly plumb or exactly level just because the opening could be off significantly. So keep that in mind. Always use your slab to ultimately decide how you set your door. But we're going to check the sides and see if we can figure out what needs adjusted here. If we put the level up on the side here, you can see we're perfectly plumb, and this wall is plumb, and you can see how the doors reveal up against that wall. Looks really good. We have the same gap here as we do here at the bottom, so that tells us that the frame is plumb. Now let's take a look at the slab. The slab shows there's a little gap here compared to over here, so the reveal actually doesn't look horrible. It's just a little bit up, which that's okay because that settles, and we are tight here in this corner, and it's gapped a good bit here at the bottom. So we know that ultimately the frame's not sitting that bad, but the slab needs to be drawn over towards this top corner. So when we do that, it's going to pull that slab open. See how it pulls that gap? So now the door wants to open compared to now it does not. So we know we have a good place to start here. So we're going to manipulate this so it's setting correctly. Because this reveal shows we want to keep this door here where it's at, the beauty of these pre-hung doors, since the trim's already attached, is we can just place nails here and it's going to hold the door where it should be before we place shims in it. So that's a really nice thing about these split jamb doors. All right, looks good. For this side of the jamb, it's tight here, and then we have our gap down here if we are setting plumb, and we still are, as you can see. So on this side, what I'm going to do, make sure our hole lines up for the latch. For whenever the doorknob's installed, we want to make sure the holes line up correctly, which it does. How I'm going to address this side then is nail this with 3 nails to where this side is plumb, and make sure that our latch side, that the holes are lining up properly, which they are. So we're going to tack a few nails here just to hold it into place. Another thing here as well, if you notice this is bowed, you can straighten it up by flexing this in or out and then tacking a nail. I'm now going to go on the other side of the door to address the adjusting. Here's the top hinge. I'm going to remove the center screw here on the hinge. I have an 1/8 inch drill bit here to pre-drill this hole out. Now some people may or may not do this, but it probably is the best practice. Using my silver screw that matches this nickel hardware, I'm going to drive it in through that hinge and into the framing of the door opening, and that's going to draw this hinge over. All right, you can see it drew it over. Now we're going to test the door from the other side to see if it fixed it. Because this was the problem area up in this corner, we're going to see if it's catching now. You can see the reveal is still relatively tight, and it still gaps up slowly going down through here. So we can still manipulate this slab some from the bottom hinge. So we're going to adjust it, but right now it's already a good start because the door will open. So we're heading in the right direction. The reason why I'm going to adjust the bottom hinge now is because this top hinge is relatively tight against the framing, so there's really not much more to move there. So that's why we're going to adjust from the bottom hinge now. To adjust the hinge, I'm going to take my Wonder Bar, get behind it, pry it over a little bit, then place a shim down behind that hinge. All right, we're going to test the door with that little bit of shim behind it to see if it helped it. All right, we're going to test the door, see if it'll shut. And it still shuts well, opens well. And another quick note here when it comes to the reveal, like I mentioned earlier, it's good to set this slab up to where it's slightly tight up in this corner on the upside, and then a slightly larger gap here in this corner than the bottom, because every time these doors always settle a little bit, just so you know. If you're enjoying this video, you may enjoy my free PDF. It's a pre-hung door installation checklist. I'll put a link to it in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. I can now install the hinge screw in this bottom hinge just like we did above, and you definitely don't want to over tighten this because it can draw it back and it'd be just a similar problem what we had before, so we just want to put it in to where it's just snug. To break the shim, we just got to take a utility knife and score it, then snap it off. To address the center hinge, all we have to do here is put a shim in until it is snug. And we don't want to pry this out and adjust it at all. This is just here to support the slab. So that looks good. We're going to subtract this screw and then address the hinge like typically would. On the latch side of the door, the shimming I do is right here where the latch actually is. Whenever we put our shims here, we don't want to stack our shims on an angle like this and then jam it in like so. We want to make sure that they are overlapped so that they're even as they adjust, so that way it doesn't torque this frame. So I'm going to place these in here and then get it solid and place a nail with our finish nailer to hold them into place. All right, the latch side is solid there. When you place this nail, make sure you don't place the nail in the doorstop part because that's where the split jamb has slid together yet. So always nail right here on this part of the jamb to hold the shims. A common problem with these doors that you're going to run into, whenever you shut the door, you'll notice we're tight up at the top, and then you can see as we go towards the bottom, we have about an 1/8 inch or so gap. Some people might not worry about that, but we do like to try to address it, and it's a very simple fix. And again, the gap doesn't always have to be at the bottom. It could be at the top or anywhere else around the door. So what we're going to do is if you push in on this jamb, it'll close the gap, but this nail that we have in the center is holding it where it needs to be. So we can push this over, shut the gap, and place a nail there to adjust it to hold it into place. So we're going to eyeball, it looks like we got about an 1/8. So I'm going to mark here on the floor where I need to push that door stop to. Here's the mark I made to where this jamb has to go to, right there. I'm going to pull it over, then place a nail right there to hold it into place. And now when we shut it, it should look a lot better. All right, good deal. Now that we have the nails holding it into position, I'm going to shim this tight. Because this gap is relatively large, we're going to put a piece of sheathing behind it first to help space it out. And then we can shim it appropriately after that. And that looks pretty good. And this is something that's going to work well because it's going to keep this bottom from getting kicked in if somebody hits it with their shoe or something. So you definitely want to shim these bottoms. And now we're going to finish addressing the split jamb. And that's nice and solid. It's now time to reinstall this part of the jamb. This is what put the split in split jamb. We are going to snap it right back together where it came out of. The best rule of thumb here is push it all the way into the jamb and then tack our nails into the trim first. In the center of the door frame where we have the door stop, that's where I'll place a few nails on each side just to hold the jamb together. Yep, that door install is complete, but you still need to touch up the nail holes, fill those in, touch up any imperfections, and then put your final coat of paint on. And then after that, you just need to install the doorknob and this door is ready to go. But we're going to install some other doors, and we'd like to go over some other problems you might run into while you're installing your doors. Notice these staples. We did not realize these were in the jamb when we were pulling it apart. That's why it's important to get these out ahead of time, because they go through into this section. So it's going to hold it together, and we did not realize it. And as you can see, this crack was from trying to pull it apart too forcefully, all because we didn't realize these staples were in here still. So just take note, remove the staples to avoid breaking your jamb. Here's something you may have to do. A lot of people wouldn't tell you this is something you might have to do, but I will. If we shut this door was hitting up in this corner. Everything was set correctly, plumb, level, all that. And yet we kept getting stuck here in this very corner. Because of that, the only thing we could do is took a block, laid it right here against the frame, and just gave a little tap and separated this, not quite an 1/8, just a little bit. It was just enough to catch. So that is something that you do got to watch for. You may have to manipulate the frames like that some. A little bit of caulk, you will never see it, but I thought it was important to disclose some of those things you may have to do. Here's a common situation that we run into often with these pre-hung doors. Because this area here is not quite wide enough for the trim to set in, all we have to do here is just rip this edge down to fit inside this opening, and it actually doesn't look bad at all either. So with these split jamb pre-hung doors, that's another thing we have to do. So we're going to rip this down and I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. When we measure the back side, we got 1 inch and about 3/4 of how much that colonial trim overhangs the frame. And now we need to look over here, and we got about 1 inch. So we got to rip off 3/4 inch in order to fit into this opening. Beautiful. After ripping the trim down like that, I typically like to dry fit the frame just to make sure there's no more cutting that needs done before installing the slab. After ripping that trim down and installing the door, you can see it looks really good. The door functions well. Definitely have to add a door stopper down here in the bottom so you don't mess up this drywall, but that's just something else you may have to do. Here's an interesting case. It's hitting up here at the top and bottom when I shut the door, and the center has a gap. So that means this jamb has to be kind of bowed to where this is not sealing or the slab is. Either way, I think I can just push in on this from the center, flex that in and nail it into place to work that out. I haven't seen that in a while. A long time ago I seen one like that. So again, that's just something that you run into with these pre-hung doors with the split jambs. I'm going to push in on the door stop at the split jamb, see if that will bow in to where it is bowed out, see if we can get that fixed. All right, as you can see, that closed it right up. I like it. So yeah, so you can fix stuff like that, just so you know. If you'd like to see how to install pre-hung doors that are not split jamb, check out this video. It'll help you out.